Hello, and welcome to Pondering the Orb. I'm Jay Requard, the wandering fantasy author, and we're on the hunt for great fantasy books and wonderful music. So subscribe, and let's get started. Philosophy offers a starting point from which we can discern truth. One of fantasy and science fiction's most prolific and grounded philosophers, Ursula K Le Guin always challenged us to beg questions for the smallest and the least of us, those pressed out of the light and into the darkness for the sake of others. She asks us to always consider the cost of our acts. I read The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas every year, and given how we are watching so many tides churn, I often think back to it. I will not lecture, but just read, and leave you to make your own considerations. This is The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas by Ursula K Le Guin, first published in 1973. The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas by Ursula K Le Guin, from the Wind's 12 Quarters. With a clamor of bells that set the swallows soaring, the festival summer came to the city Omelas, bright towered by the sea. The ringing of the boats in the harbor sparkled with flags. In the streets between houses with red roofs and painted walls, between old moss-grown gardens and under avenues of trees, past great parks and public buildings, processions moved. Some were decorous, old people in long, stiff robes of mauve and gray, grave master workmen, quiet, merry women carrying their babies and chatting as they walked. In other streets the music beat faster, a shimmering of gong and tambourine, and the people went dancing. The procession was a dance. Children dodged in and out, their high calls rising like the swallows crossing flights over the music and the singing. All the processions wound toward the north side of the city, where on the great water meadow called the green fields boys and girls, naked in the bright air, with mud-stained feet and ankles and long, lithe arms, exercised their restive horses before the race. The horses wore no gear but a halter without bit. Their manes were braided with streamers of silver, gold, and green. They flared their nostrils and pranced and boasted to one another. They were vastly excited, the horses being the only animal who has adopted our ceremonies as his own. Far off to the north and west, the mountains stood up half encircling Omelas on her bay. The air of morning was so clear that the snow still crowning the 18 peaks burned with white gold fire across miles of sunlit air under the dark blue of the sky. There was just enough wind to make the banners that marked the racecourse snap and flutter now and then. In the silence of the broad green meadows one could hear the music winding through the city streets, farther and nearer and ever approaching, a cheerful faint sweetness on the air that time to time trembled and gathered together and broke out into the joyous clanging of the bells. Joyous! How is one to tell about joy? How describe the citizens of Omelas? They were not simple folk, you see, though they were happy. But we do not say the words of cheer much any more. All smiles have become archaic. Given a description such as this one tends to make certain assumptions. Given a description such as this one tends to look next for the king, mounted on a splendid stallion and surrounded by his noble knights, or perhaps in a golden litter borne by great muscled slaves. But there was no king. They did not use swords or keep slaves. They were not barbarians. I do not know the rules or laws of their society, but I suspect that they were singularly few. As they did without monarchy and slavery, so they also got on without the stock exchange, the advertisement, the secret police, and the bomb. Yet, I repeat, these were not simple folk, not dulcet shepherds, noble savages, bland utopians. They were not less complex than us. The trouble is that we have a bad habit, encouraged by pedants and sophisticates, of considering happiness as something rather stupid. Only pain is intellectual, only evil interesting. This is the treason of the artist, a refusal to admit the banality of evil and the terrible boredom of pain. If you can't lick 'em, join 'em. If it hurts, repeat it. But to praise despair is to condemn delight. To embrace violence is to lose hold of everything else. But to praise despair is to condemn delight. To embrace violence is to lose hold of everything else. We have almost lost hold. We can no longer describe happy man, nor make any celebration of joy. How can I tell you about the people of Omelas? They were not naive and happy children, though their children were, in fact, happy. They were mature, intelligent, passionate adults whose lives were not wretched. Oh, miracle! But I wish I could describe it better. I wish I could convince you. Omelas sounds in my words like a city in a fairy tale, long ago and far away, once upon a time. Perhaps it would be best if you imagined it as your own fancy bids, assuming it will rise to the occasion, for certainly I cannot suit you all. For instance, how about technology? I think that there would be no cars or helicopters in and above the streets. This follows from the fact that people of Omelas are happy people. Happiness is based on a just discrimination of what is necessary, what is neither necessary nor destructive, and what is destructive. In the middle category, however, that of the unnecessary but undestructive, that of comfort, luxury, exuberance, etc., they could perfectly well have central heating, subway trains, washing machines, and all kinds of marvelous devices not yet invented here. Floating light sources, fuelless power, a cure for the common cold. Or they could have none of that. Doesn't matter. As you like it. I incline to think that people from towns up and down the coast have been coming to Omelas during the last days before the festival on very fast little trains and double-decked trams, and that the train stations of Omelas is actually the handsomest building in town, though plainer than the magnificent farmers' market. But even granted trains, I fear that Omelas so far strikes some of you as goody-goody. Smiles, bells, parades, horses, blah. If so, please add an orgy. If an orgy would help, don't hesitate. Let us not, however, have temples which issue beautiful nude priests and priestesses, already half in ecstasy and ready to copulate with any man or woman, lover or stranger, who desires union with the deep godhead of the blood, although that was my first idea. But really, it would not be better to have temples in Omelas, at least not man-temples. Religion, yes, clergy, no. Surely the beautiful nudes can just wander about, offering themselves like divine souffles to the hunger of the needy and the rapture of the flesh. Let them join the processions. Let tambourines be struck above the copulations, and the glory of desire be proclaimed upon the gongs, and, a not unimportant point, let the offspring of these delightful rituals be beloved and looked after by all. One thing I know there is none of in Omelas is guilt. But what else should there be? I thought at first there were no drugs, but that is puritanical. For those who like it, the faint insistent sweetness of Druse may perfume the ways of the city. Druse which first brings a great lightness and brilliance to the mind and limbs, and then after some hours a dreamy languor, and wonderful visions at last of the very arcane and innermost secrets of the universe, as well as an exciting pleasure of sex beyond all belief. And it is not habit-forming. For more modest taste, I think there ought to be beer. What else? What else belongs in the joyous city? The sense of victory, surely, the celebration of courage. But as we did without clergy, let us do without soldiers. The joy built upon successful slaughter is not the right kind of joy. It will not do. It is fearful and it is trivial. A boundless and generous contentment, a magnanimous triumph felt not only against some outer enemy, but in communion with the finest and fairest in the souls of all men everywhere, and the splendor of the world's summer. That is what swells in the hearts of the people of Omelas, and the victory they celebrate that is life. I don't think many of them need to take Druse. Most of the processions have reached the green fields by now. A marvelous smell of cooking goes forth from the red and blue tents of the provisioners. The faces of small children are ambly sticky. In the benign gray beard of a man, a couple of crumbs of rich pastry are entangled. The youths and girls have mounted their horses and are beginning to group around the starting line of the course. An old woman, small, fat, and laughing, is passing out flowers from a basket, and tall young men wear her flowers in their shining hair. A child 9 or 10 sits on the edge of the crowd alone, playing a wooden flute. People pause to listen, and they smile, but they do not speak to him, for he never ceases playing and never sees them, his eyes wholly wrapped in the sweet magic of the tune. He finishes, and slowly lowers his hands holding the wooden flute. As if that private silence were the signal, all at once a trumpet sounds from the pavilion near the starting line. Imperious, melancholy, piercing, the 10 horses rear on their slender legs, and some of them neigh in answer. Sober-faced, the young riders stroked their horses' necks and soothed them, whispering, "Quiet, quiet, there, my beauty, my hope." They began to form and rank along the starting line. The crowds along the racecourse are like a field of grass and flowers in the wind. The festival of summer has begun. Do you believe? Do you accept the festival, the city, the joy? No? Then let me describe one more thing. In a basement under one of the beautiful public buildings of Omelas, and perhaps in the cellar of one of the spacious private homes, there is a room. It has one locked door and no window. A little light sleeps in dustily between the cracks of the boards, second-handed from cobweb windows somewhere across the cellar. In one corner of the little room, a couple of mops with stiff, clotted, foul-smelling heads stand near a rusty bucket. The floor is dirt, a little damp to the touch, as cellar dirt usually is. The room is about 3 paces long and 2 wide, a mere broom closet or disused tool room. In the room, a child is sitting. It could be a boy or a girl. It looks about 6, but is actually nearly 10. It is feeble-minded. Perhaps it was born defective. Or perhaps it has become imbecile through fear, malnutrition, and neglect. It picks its nose and occasionally fumbles vaguely with its toes or genitals, as it sits hunched in the corner farthest from the bucket and the 2 mops. It is afraid of the mops. It finds them horrible. It shuts its eyes, but it knows the mops are still standing there. The door is locked, and nobody will come. The door is always locked, and nobody ever comes, except that sometimes the child has no understanding of time or interval. Sometimes the door rattles terribly and opens, and a person or several people are there. One of them may come in and kick the child to make it stand up. The others never come close, but peer in at it with frightened, disgusted eyes. The food bowl and water jug are hastily filled. The door is locked. The eyes disappear. The people at the door never say anything, but the child, who has not always lived in the tool room and can remember sunlight and his mother's voice, sometimes speaks. "I will be good," it says. "Please let me out. I will be good." They never answer. The child used to scream for help at night and cry a good deal, and now it only makes a kind of whining, "Ee-ha, ee-ha," and it speaks less and less often. It is so thin there are no calves to its legs. Its belly protrudes. It lives on half a bowl of cornmeal and grease a day. It is naked. Its buttocks and thighs are a mass of festered sores, and it sits in its own excrement continually. They all know it is there, all the people of Omelas. Some of them have come to see it. Others content merely to know it is there. They all know it has to be there. Some of them understand why, and some do not, but they all understand that their happiness, the beauty of their city, the tenderness of their friendships, the health of their children, the wisdom of their scholars, the skill of their makers, even the abundance of their harvests and the kindly weathers of their skies, depend wholly on this child's abominable misery. This is usually explained to children when they are between 8 and 12, whenever they seem capable of understanding. And most of those who come to see this child are young people, though often enough an adult comes, and comes back to see the child. No matter how well the matter has been explained to them, these young spectators are always shocked and sickened at the sight. They feel disgust, which they had thought themselves superior to. They feel anger, outrage, impotence, despite all of the explanations. They would like to do something for the child, but there is nothing they can do. If the child were brought up into the sunlight out of that vile place, if it were cleaned and fed and comforted, that would be a good thing, indeed. But if it were done, in that day and hour all the prosperity and beauty and delight of Omelas would wither and be destroyed. Those are the terms. To exchange all goodness and grace of every life in Omelas for that single small improvement. To throw away the happiness of thousands for the chance of happiness for one. That would be to let guilt within the walls indeed. The terms are strict and absolute. There may not even be a kind word spoken to the child. Often the young people go home in tears, or in a tearless rage, when they have seen the child and faced this terrible paradox. They may brood over it over weeks or years, but as time goes on, they begin to realize that even if the child could be released, it would not get much good of its freedom. A little vague pleasure of warmth and food, no real doubt, but little more. It is too degraded and imbecile to know any real joy. It has been afraid too long to ever be free of fear. Its habits are too uncouth for it to respond to humane treatment. Indeed, after so long it would probably be wretched without walls about it to protect it, and darkness for its eyes, and its own excrement to sit in. Their tears at the bitter injustice dry when they begin to perceive the terrible justice of reality, and to accept it. Yet it is their tears and anger, the trying of their generosity and the acceptance of their helplessness, which are perhaps the true source of splendor of their lives. Theirs is no vapid, irresponsible happiness. They know they, like the child, are not free. They know compassion. It is the existence of the child, and their knowledge of its existence, that makes possible the nobility of their architecture, the poignancy of their music, the profundity of their science. It is because of the child they are so gentle with children. They know if the wretched one were not sniveling in the dark, the other one, the flute player, could make no joyful music as the young riders line up in their beauty for the race in the sunlight on the first morning of summer. Now, do you believe them? Are they not more credible? But there is one more thing to tell, and this is quite incredible. At times one of the adolescent girls or boys who go to see the child does not go home to weep or rage, and does not, in fact, go home at all. Sometimes also a man or woman much older falls silent for a day or two, then leaves home. These people go out into the street, and walk down the street alone. They keep walking, and walk straight out of the city of Omelas, through the beautiful gates. They keep walking along the farmlands of Omelas. Each one goes alone, youth or girl, man or woman. Night falls. The traveler must pass down the village streets, between the houses with yellow-lit windows, and on out into the darkness of the fields. Each alone, they go west or north, towards the mountains. They go on. They leave Omelas. They walk ahead into the darkness, and they do not come back. The place they go towards is a place less imaginable to most of us than the city of happiness. I cannot describe it at all. It is possible that it does not exist. But they seem to know where they are going, the ones who walk away from Omelas. A guest from the very first season of Pondering the Orb, A.J. Hartley is a New York Times best-selling author, an Audible best-selling author, and a former professor of Shakespeare. He, Kuma, Hartley, and Hisako Osako have come together with Falstaff Books to release Hideki Smith, Demon Queller. Set in the fictional mountain town of Portersville, North Carolina, Caleb and his sister Emily stumble on an impossible Shinto shrine in the Appalachian Hills and begin an adventure that touches on the themes of heritage, belonging, and discovering who one truly is. And this book is nominated this year for a Dragon Award. There's a link below if you are able to vote. Let's read from Hideki Smith, Demon Queller, by A.J. Hartley, Kuma Hartley, and Hisako Osako. Hideki Smith, Demon Queller, by A.J. Hartley, Hisako Osako, and Kuma Hartley. Chapter 1. My name is Hideki Smith, and I'm a loser's loser. Except that no one calls me Hideki. They call me Caleb because my parents, I swear to God this is true, actually searched for the most common boy's name the year I was born and went with that. Hideki, my middle name, was added to keep my Obachan, my Japanese grandmother, from going ballistic, but my mom was determined to fully adopt my dad's Anglo ancestry, so I got stuck with Caleb. Her goal was to make us the most regular American family in the neighborhood, whatever that meant. If you went through our house, you'd see nothing, and I mean nothing, that gave away the fact that one side of the family was Japanese. I was probably the only kid in my school who didn't read manga or watch anime. I never used chopsticks except once at my grandmother's, when I had wallpapered her dining room with food. I had never eaten sushi, not that raw fish is a highlight of life on the edge of the Great Smoky Mountains, and I'm pretty sure that the only Japanese words I know are all in this paragraph. I guess they meant well. Portersville, North Carolina isn't what you'd call a cosmopolitan place, and I can't blame them for not wanting us to stand out. Apart from my sister and me, the only other Asian kid at either the middle or high school is a Korean girl I've never spoken to, called Sue Park. Everyone assumes she's my cousin. The town is little more than a railway crossing and a central square surrounded by half-empty strip malls. Population, 6,732. I know that number exactly because someone on the town council is paid to repaint the number on the Welcome to Portersville sign on the interstate every 6 months. Weird, right? Like, saying exactly how many people live here would make you stay after you notice that the cotton tobacco fields have dried up and the furniture industry has been deader than the roadkill for 20 years. The only jobs are working for our pals at Southern Shale Gas, who spend their time blowing off the tops of mountains, which is stupid because, if you ask me, the Great Smoky Mountains are the only reason anyone might actually want to live here. My parents don't work for the fracking company. They run an inconvenience store. It's supposed to be a convenience store, but it's way over the edge of town behind the Walmart that closed a year ago, so it's not very, convenient. And that's where I was when all this started, when my status as a loser's loser got complicated. Actually, I wasn't there so much as I was leaving there, fast as I could run. I worked in the inconvenience store after school, stocking shelves and unpacking boxes of chips and beef jerky, filling the fridge cases with soda, and genuinely trying not to break stuff while avoiding my classmates. I was supposed to be there till we closed at 9, but I had had a bad day at school that had gotten worse when I got home. There had been words. That's what my mom called a screaming match, like that made it into a garden party or something. These particular words had been about my grades, my forgetting to do homework, my utter bombing of the football tryouts my dad had convinced me to take a shot at, even though he knew I couldn't catch a ball if the lives of entire peoples depended on it, and my general and effortless skills as a screw-up. The usual, in other words. Today, however, I had managed to add an extra special ingredient to the whole nasty mix I'm not going to tell you about. Anyway, I took off, slammed the door and bolted. I might not have wide receiver speed, but I can shift when I need to. To tell you the truth, I need to quite a bit. So yeah, I ran. Past Desmond's Liquors, one of the few stores around here which did a roaring trade, past the CVS and through the forecourt of the McDonald's where my sister Emily, known exclusively to my grandmother as Kazuko, was hoping to get a part-time job next summer, because asking "do you want fries with that" was supposed to be a solid preparation for her adult future. I went by the boarded-up church on the corner of Main, timed my run between 2 crawling pickups, and crossed into the parking lot by the old Walmart. When I reached the chain-link fence at the back, which had already started to vanish under the strangling raft of kudzu vine, I checked that no one was coming after me, then clambered awkwardly over. It took me 3 tries. At least the security lights didn't work anymore, so no one saw me falling into the bushes on the other side like a sloth with its paws tied together. I didn't mind the dark. It was easier to disappear, which was pretty much my goal in life. The last thing I wanted was any kind of kid from school to spot me, even if I didn't think I had any cool points to lose. So I pushed hurriedly through the undergrowth, avoiding a patch of poison ivy, and onto a deer trail that ran up into the wooded hill that surrounded the town. This was my spot, the one place I was pretty sure I would be undisturbed. There were hiking trails higher up which drew backpackers and day trippers from Charlotte, but once the sun went down I even had those to myself. I climbed, listening to the tree frogs and throb of insects all around me, wondering how late I would have to stay out to be sure everyone would be asleep when I went home. That was a tough one. Mom and Dad would wait up, and if I stayed out too late, they'd call the cops. Then I'd have to deal with Mark Halpern's dad coming over in his squad car and looking at my parents in that way that both managed to be pitying and sort of mocking, Like my status as Lord of Portersville's idiots was somehow their fault. Which it wasn't. We could not go forward without highlighting an important part of this show. Pondering the Orb for the last 2 seasons has been gifted with the ability to play Overcrest, Shadows, and Streetlights from 2023's Back Again. Now our favorite chill synth composer from Arkansas is back with Newline, an atmospheric single highlighting aural nuances and potentials we cannot wait to hear him play more of. Playing Newline, released this year in 2024, this is Overcrest. Thank you for joining me for another fantastic adventure into books and music. Unfortunately, we weren't able to get a Melodeath band this time, but we will for the next episode, which is important because we have only 2 episodes left for this season. So see you then, safe journeys.